Today we have three parables that Jesus teaches us. I'm going to focus on those first two, the parable of the wheat and the weeds, and the parable of the mustard seed. But if we were to kind of think of a theme, but it's tough to think of a theme in terms of parables because Jesus' teachings are multifold. It's not just very simple. As we hear, there's mysteries of the kingdom hidden throughout these parables. So we can, every time we read them, we can get something, a new teaching out of them, or maybe something we didn't realize before. But today maybe we'll focus on this in these parables, is that Jesus is exhorting us that we must be careful how we cultivate our faith. That we have to be mindful of how we cultivate and grow our faith. We have a role in it. But I'll first start by saying this parable of the weeds and the wheat I believe it's a very hopeful parable. Now you may think at the end of this gospel, Father, you just said that there will be wailing and grinding of teeth. How hopeful is that? Are you out of your mind? That's beside the point, but let's continue. So there is, even though we have this very strong language, of course it is, strong language of Jesus, there's hopefulness to this. Because if we look at the very beginning of this, there's still time. That the weeds and the wheat, the farmer says, no, let's not pull them up all at once. Let's give some time. That's hopefulness to us. Because maybe we are struggling. Maybe we're kind of down on ourselves for being sinners. Maybe we think, I don't know, I keep struggling to grow in holiness. I don't think I'll ever do it. There's hope. There's hope. We don't have to worry. God is not going to strike us down right on the spot. No, God works with us. He gives us time to grow and become like children of God. And also that's good for us who maybe have people in our family who've maybe lost faith, stepped away from the faith, don't come to church right now. There's hope. Because it's not, so Jesus isn't striking them down right now. No, we have till the end of time. Until we take our last breath, it's not late to come to Jesus. So use those words as hope. That we don't need to worry. That, yes, there's still time. Keep praying for those people. Keep praying for ourselves. There's still time for us to grow and bear fruit like the wheat of the world. But also say, even though this is a hopeful parable, Jesus is still urging us to be vigilant. Very much so. He's saying we must be careful how we cultivate our faith and that we essentially do cultivate our faith. We can't just leave this to something to be on its own. Jesus again talks today about hell. He talks about hell pretty often. And so that's something we should take to heart. Like, no, if Jesus says hell is there, hell is real. We should have a fear for it. Now, not an unhealthy fear. We shouldn't despair that we're not going to be saved. No, the great news about that is that God's mercy is overwhelming. God is a very merciful God. If we are reaching out to Him, if we are earnestly trying, well, we can trust in God's mercy. But also we should be reminded too that no, hell is very real. There is a chance we could lose our salvation if we turn away from God. So not only that, but also that we should also be reminded too that we need to take care that we cultivate this gift of faith that we have. That we don't just assume that we're going to be saved, but that we work with God throughout our lives and to try to grow in holiness. That's maybe the goal of the Christian life, is to grow in holiness. But maybe even more than that. Maybe the goal of the Christian life is to make our entire life about Jesus. That not just to make faith just something that we do on Sunday, but to make it about every day of our lives. That's a temptation we could fall into, to just see our practice of the faith as something we do on Sunday and compartmentalize it to just something that's another activity. We shouldn't do that. Jesus doesn't want that. He wants us, as He says to those disciples, come and follow me. Leave everything behind. Leave the world behind and follow me each and every day of your lives. That's what we want to do. We want to make everything about Jesus. So we shouldn't be Christians just on Sunday. We want to go out and we want to live this life as if something affected us here. It is a temptation to go out and maybe just act like, we're so holy here on Sunday, and then just go out and forget that we even had the Eucharist on Sunday. We want to be growing always in our faith. But it's also to say that Sunday is very important as well. Sunday is something we shouldn't neglect, because this is maybe essentially where we get that fuel to be disciples. We receive the Eucharist, or we get to worship with God on Sunday. The Eucharist, as we hear in our faith, is the source and summit of our faith. This is what gives us strength to go out and do good things. And so we should focus on that. We should realize just how important this is. Now, sometimes I get this question. Sometimes I'm kind of tired of it. Sometimes people say, like, Father, how late can I show up and still fulfill my obligation on Sunday to the Mass? I'm tired of it because I hate answering it. But I hate it because it's not the right. We should be thinking in a different way. We don't want to look at the Mass as a requirement. It is an obligation. It's something that is better for us than almost anything else. But we don't want to look at it as something like checking a box. Maybe we should talk about what the Mass actually is. So what is the Mass? The Mass is the one perfect sacrifice at Calvary. The one perfect sacrifice at Calvary. When we come to Mass, we are participating in that one perfect sacrifice that happened at Calvary. If we think about it in a kind of a broad theological level, there has only been one Mass in time. And that happened at Calvary. And that was the perfect offering of the Son, Jesus, to the Father on the cross. So what we do here, the great news is that God exists outside of time. He works outside of time, is that we are present for that offering of the Son to the Father each time we come to Mass. So that could change our entire perspective. Maybe we would want to get here, maybe a little bit early, 5, 10, maybe even a half hour early, to prepare ourselves for that. To prepare ourselves for witnessing and experiencing that offering of the Son to the Father. And in the same way, maybe we would want to stay afterward and maybe just say a little prayer, say a prayer of thanksgiving to Jesus and the Father for offering that sacrifice for us. So that changes our entire worldview maybe, because this is something that is so profound. It's a gift. It's a gift to us, what we do each and every Sunday. And this is where our discipleship really gets super fed. We get the fuel we have to live our lives, our spiritual lives, right here and now. And we have two perfect examples of discipleship that can help us to live as disciples even better. And they were both present at the cross. From time to time when I pray, I like to go to the pray with the crucifixion. And any one of the 4 Gospels you go to will be a great place to start. But I often like to go to John's Gospel, John chapter 20. And I like that because it talks about 2 people especially, that we hear that there are many people at the cross, but there's 2. The Blessed Mother and St. John, the beloved disciple. They are both with Jesus at the cross there. And they show us what it means to be a perfect disciple, because they are there at the foot of Jesus at the cross, receiving from Him, gazing upon Jesus and the cross and pondering that love that He has for the world. And allowing that love that He had for all of us to change themselves as well. So sometimes when I pray with that image, I often think about what's going on in the souls of the Blessed Mother and St. John in those moments, those hours that they stood with Jesus in His suffering. That's perfect discipleship, being with Jesus in His suffering. What was going on in their souls? And I kind of think about the Blessed Mother. She probably at some point maybe had those same words that she spoke to the angel Gabriel when she had that great news given to her. She probably had those same words on her heart that she spoke to the angel Gabriel when she found she was with child with the Son of God. I'm the handmaid of the Lord. Be it done to me according to thy word. And I think about that. What a profound moment, because Mary's faith was similar then as it is at that moment, that she had that same faith, that same openness to God's will. And that's what this sacrifice can do for us. It can change us to be more open to what God does in our life. That it can make us open to be more better disciples who follow the will perfectly of God, just like Mary and John. And that may tie in to that parable of the mustard seed, because that essentially tells us what openness to God can do in our lives. That our faith, we may feel like our faith is really small, like a mustard seed, but if we give it the right conditions, it will blossom into something that bears much fruit. That's what Jesus says. The parable of the mustard seed maybe teaches us 2 things. One is that it's God who does the growing. We have our part to play, but it's God who does the growing. So if we feel like I'm not holy enough, let God do more of the work. Give Him the space to work. The second is that we do need to give God the space to work. If you ever go to a hardware store, if you go to a flower shop and you go and you buy a little package of seeds, the package of flower seeds, if you could have them on your shelf for years and they'll not do anything. They're just going to remain seeds. But if you take them out of the package and you put it in soil, you give it water, give it sunlight, well, then that thing is going to blossom. That mustard seed is going to blossom into something that bears a lot of fruit. The same thing with our faith. We can't leave our faith in the package, so to speak. We have to nourish it. We have to give it space so that God can do work with that small faith to grow it even larger. So what are the conditions that we can make so that our faith grows? Well, one you're doing right now is being present at the foot of the cross as we celebrate and we participate in this one perfect sacrifice of Jesus, and we gaze upon the cross. That's one thing that's a great start. And then we can also rely on the other sacraments: confession, penance, confirmation, marriage, leaning into those. Those can help us bear much fruit. But then also in our lives to practice even greater charity when we're called upon it by the Lord. The church has given us some beautiful other ways to grow in our faith or to practice our faith, the corporal and spiritual works of mercy. If we allow our faith, if we give our faith that space and those conditions, if we cultivate it in that way, we may be surprised at just how great our faith can grow. Jesus has given us a great gift of faith. It really maybe sometimes feels like a very small gift of faith. But if we give it the right conditions, if we allow that space for God, we'll be surprised how much fruit we bear.